You are listening to Your League Tennis Podcast with your host, Anthony Radonia. Anthony's an avid weekend warrior tennis player, just like you. Every week, he'll be interviewing new and exciting guests that will not only differ in experience and skill level, but also in age and physical ability. Your League Tennis Podcast is about making you a better tennis player. Whether you're a beginner or have been playing for years, in your 20s or in your 60s. Now, here is your host, Anthony Radonia.
All right, cool. Well, how are you, Josh?
I'm doing well, Anthony. Great to be with you today.
Yes, I'm so thankful that you agreed to come on. So I really appreciate it. You are Josh Burger, and we hooked up through Instagram. I follow you on Instagram. I think you were following me too. I love your content. I've been listening to some of your stuff recently too, just obviously in preparation for this, but even before I was sort of skimming your Instagram always. So I like the stuff you put out, and I contacted you and said, hey, if you're interested or would do me the favor and honor of coming on, and you said yes. So I really appreciate it, Josh. Thank you so much.
Well, no, I'm appreciative of I'm appreciative as well, and yeah, thank you for the invite, and yeah, really excited to talk with you. I love the platform that you have, and the and also the message. Being able to focus on league tennis and people that are playing at throughout the country
Yeah.
and world. Different tennis clubs, different parks, different the vast majority of tennis players are not the ones that we watch on TV.
Yep.
They're the people that are playing, as you said, weekend warriors, or the people that are doing clinics, and people that are that really love the sport, and that, yeah, I think that those sorts of people deserve to be spoken to directly by, and so I love the platform that you have here.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Well, let's start with a little about you first. So I was trying to figure out too, the Tiebreaker Psych and the Tennis IQ podcast, are they the same or different? You have two sort of separate things going on?
Yeah, so they're different. So Tiebreaker Psych is my company. So it's my full-time job is I do sports psychology with different types of athletes. I work with a lot of tennis players. Probably 50-60% of my clients are tennis players, of adults, junior players, college players, different levels of players, but also athletes of other sports. So Tiebreaker Psych, as you could probably imagine, is a bit of a
Yeah.
tennis reference there. And then Tennis IQ Podcast is a podcast that I'm the co-host of, along with Dr. Brian Lomax, and we talk about the mental side of tennis. We talk about, the majority of our episodes are the two of us, and we talk about different topics. Sometimes those topics are more in terms of details, in terms of what can you do in between points, or your self-talk, or breathing. And sometimes they're bigger picture things, more philosophical, or about motivation. Why do we play in the first place? Things like that. Sometimes we have some guests on as well, so kind of a mix of things. But yeah, it's all about the mental side of tennis. But that's something that Brian and I both do, on the side, something that we both really enjoy. And maybe in a similar way, it's a great way to to maybe reach a broader audience, rather than just the specific people that we work with through our businesses.
And why the focus on tennis for the Tennis IQ podcast? You have a background in tennis as well, or?
I do, yeah. So I grew up playing different sports, but tennis became my main sport. And through some of those early experiences, recognized the importance of the mental side of the game. And I played in college, at the Division 3 level.
Cool.
And then yeah, got into coaching, and coached at the Division 1 level for a couple years. Coached at the Tennis Hall of Fame in Newport, Rhode Island as well, and at some different clubs in the Northeast and in the West Coast, actually. And yeah, so sort of through, and Brian also comes from a competitive tennis environment, competitive tennis background. So both of us come from this tennis background, and work with a lot of tennis players, but some other athletes as well. And yeah, wanted to sort of link up, and yeah, and offer, have a podcast that really focuses on that side of things.
Okay, so how old are you? Forgot to ask that.
I am 29. I turned 30 on Friday, though.
Oh my gosh. Okay, you're still young then. And then, so are you playing now for fun or league, anything like that, or not?
So
Not a
I'm
lot of
playing
time.
some. So the last few years, so the last, I would say almost 2 years. So I was coaching at the Tennis Hall of Fame until October of 2021. So almost 2 years ago. So I was playing a lot up until then. These past, you know, nearly 2 years, I haven't been playing maybe as consistently. I've done quite a bit of travel over that time. And frankly, haven't been playing as consistently as I'd like. But more recently, this past month or two, have been trying to play a lot more and start to play some more matches, playing in a USTA flex, sorry, UTR flex league,
Ah,
and
cool.
trying to just get some matches in, trying to feel the pressure of being in that match environment, which is,
Yeah.
as we know, can be pretty different from more of a practice environment.
And the flex leagues are the ones where they let all different UTRs in, or how does that work?
So I think it's a collection of people of different
Yeah.
UTRs, but they pair you with some people that are similar UTR. And then, you and that person, you get their email and their phone number, and you can, arrange the match on your own schedules rather than,
Oh,
playing
cool.
playing in a tournament where they say, you have to be here at this time. And, especially when people are busy, it can be it can be nice. But I definitely plan to play in some tournaments and some leagues in the very near future. It's been a goal of mine in recent months.
That's cool. Yeah, there's something like that out here in Orange County where they do that too. They're sort of set up a tournament. It's a little different. They set up a tournament, but they give everyone the time to sort of work out the matches. Like they trade phone numbers. Really cool idea. And so the people just work out the time together. So pretty cool. Um, so when did you start getting into the mental side, the tiebreaker psych, and obviously your focus of study? When did you start going down that road?
Yeah, I would say it was actually some of my experiences as a junior tennis player that first led me to that. I both me and some of the people around me, I would say, had challenges relating to the mental side of the game. I would, yeah, be in a higher pressure moment and really feel the nerves or the anxiety. I would get, pretty frustrated, and I think some of the people around me were maybe even worse. So it became pretty clear from a relatively young age. I'd say from around middle school when I started getting into the sport a little bit more that this was important, that the mental game was important. I read a couple of books on the mental side of tennis, Winning Ugly and The Inner Game of Tennis,
Yep.
and yeah, through both of those experiences, yeah, through reading both of those books, they helped me. They helped me just sort of understand a little bit more what was going on mentally. And I never talked with anyone, never talked with a sports psychology professional, but some of those experiences, um, yeah, led me to be more interested in it. And then, like, when I got to college, I was playing, college tennis. I studied psychology, and
Mhm.
definitely, started thinking about what I wanted to do long term, and did a master's degree in sports psychology, right after my undergrad. And while I was there, I did my dissertation into mental toughness in college tennis, and interviewed some Division I coaches on about mental toughness. And yeah, that sort of one thing led to another in a certain way. But yeah, it really started with some of those early experiences.
Oh man, that's so cool. So your business then is literally, is it more, I guess, what I would think of as a normal psychologist? Are you sitting down one on one with someone and sort of talking through whatever their issues are, or how does that work?
So it's different. I mean, I always try to be, pretty clear in terms of what I do, what I offer and what I'm qualified to do, and what I don't do and what I'm not qualified to do. So, really what I work on with athletes is the performance side. So I'm a, sports psychology coach. I'm not a, therapist or
Yeah.
psychologist. So, there is that difference here. So really what I work on with athletes is the performance side. So really trying to build different skills that
Mm.
can help them hopefully perform at higher levels, enjoy their sport more, things like that. So it really is, there's some talking through things that takes place. If they just played in a match or a tournament, let's start there. Let's talk about how did that go, what went well, what didn't go so well, how are they applying some of the things that we're talking about. But then there's a lot about that skill development piece in terms of building different mental skills, whether those be self-talk, whether those be routines, whether that's how we prepare for matches, things like visualization, goal setting, a number of different skills. But yeah, I would say it's a lot about that and really trying to build skills that can help athletes perform in the way that they want to.
So how big is this mental side of things in sports? So, I mean, let's obviously just relate it to tennis. If I'm a talented tennis player, let's say I don't work as hard as the next person, but I really have a strong mentality, a strong mental game. I mean, is there a way to sort of, I don't know, like put me on the scale of should I be just as good as another person who doesn't have a mental game and, I guess is in great shape or something like that? Is there a way to compare it?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you hear different people, whether they're professional athletes, whether they're club league players, talk about it and put percentages on it.
Yeah.
And I think if you ask 10 different people what percentage of the sport is mental, I think you'll get 10 different answers. So I think it's tough to compare. I would say that the mental side of the game is definitely a critical piece. It's a critical, necessary piece to success and to playing, to playing your best version of your game. And so is the physical piece, right? I think they're both critical pieces. And I think, as we reach higher and higher levels. And I know probably a lot of, league players, whatever level they're playing at, if they're at the 3.0 level, not all, but many of them have aspirations one day of maybe playing at the 3.5 level.
Mhm.
The 3.5 player wants to play at the 4.0 level at some point. And I think if as we start to climb the ladder a little bit, um, I think I think the mental game can be more and more of a difference maker because, at a certain level, everybody has the physical abilities,
Mm,
right? If we look at the
yeah.
ATP and WTA players, they all have the physical abilities. They wouldn't be there. Um, but, if we look at the 3.5 player, how many of them are focusing on the mental game? Some of them certainly are, but, I think it can really be the difference maker. And I brought up the name of my podcast earlier, and it sort of is a double meaning. There's, Tiebreaker Psych. It's sort of, obviously we want sort of two different things. Number one, we want to be able to play at our best during the biggest moments, during tiebreakers or third sets or things like that, but also that it can be a tiebreaker or it can be a difference maker between different people, where if there's two players and they both have a similar level of physical ability and one of them is more focused on how they're going to handle different situations mentally. Okay, when I'm in this, deuce point or this, third set, this is how I want to, how I want to play it. And I have a game plan, and I'm talking to myself in a constructive, effective way. And I have a routine that I use in between points, which is, I think, one of the biggest skills that players can try to develop.
Mhm.
If I'm, utilizing some of these different skills and my who's a similar physical level isn't, I like my chances. So I think it really can be that difference maker. But I think it's the mental piece and the physical piece are both really critical to each player's success.
Yeah, and I remember even seeing a post, I thought it was on your Instagram. I might have made a note of it. But yeah, it was interesting because you were saying how much of a percentage the mental side is. And I've always tried to figure that out too. It's like if 100% is what we want, is like 50% mental, 50% talent and hard work. But then I started thinking when I was looking through your posts, yeah, it's too tough to do it that way. It might just be like, can we reach our 100% of hard work? Can we reach our 100% of the mental side kind of thing? And then once we at least maximize our categories, then we've achieved sort of what we want as an individual, right? And so, you know, can you talk a little more about routine? You've said routine a few times. I'm really interested to hear why is that so important from the mental side?
Yeah, and I like the way that you frame that, Anthony, in terms of each person's formula or each person's sort of combination of factors is different, and that's
Mhm.
okay. Some people have the stronger serve. Some people are more consistent. Some people are faster. Like some people maybe naturally have are stronger in certain elements of the mental game. Maybe that be focus. Maybe that be confidence. Whatever that may be. To answer your question about routines, yeah, I find that especially for tennis players, the in between point routine to be up there with the most important skills that a player can really develop as it relates to the mental game. According to the rule book, and again, some people play a little bit faster and some people play a little bit slower. According to the rule book, you generally have about 20 seconds in between points. But I would ask you, Anthony, and I would ask whoever's listening as well, how would you say you're generally spending that time in between points? Let me ask you. How would you say you generally spend that time in between points? And maybe it depends a little bit on what's been happening.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because as we're talking about it, I don't know, which is obviously a bad answer. Besides probably me mentally trying to catch my breath, sort of a good breathing exercise. Um, that's probably it, sadly. And that's probably not good enough. And the only thing I can think of where I should probably add something is, and I wanted to ask you about this too, and I know you brought this up through your Instagram, was visualization. So maybe there's an opportunity there to visualize my return prior to them serving or my serve prior to me serving. But I don't do that. So I need to.
I think visualization can definitely play an important role here. I think breathing can as well. I think essentially we want to have a system where we can put one point behind us,
Mm,
reset, and then really try to refocus on that next point. And I
yeah.
think, a framework I like to use is from Dr. Jim Lear, who's um, some people might be familiar with. He's been in tennis for decades and decades. He's based down was based down in Florida, worked with a lot of top professional players, and he developed this system called the 16-second cure, where it's essentially four steps where each of those steps only really being a few seconds long, but really with that first step having a way to put that last point behind you. Can we recognize what happened in that last point, sort of try to do that objectively. Let's just notice what happened in that last point. And can we also walk, not just stay where we are, can we walk away from sort of where that point ended, but try to do that with good body language.
Mm,
Some people will even shift their racket. So sort of starting there in that first step, and you know first of all, what happened, and then I'm moving away, using my body language to help me move away. And then sort of getting into that next step where really focusing on our breathing, really trying to reset, relax. I like that you mentioned that. Catching our breath is really important, right?
yeah.
I recently moved out to Boulder, Colorado, where the altitude is over 5,000 feet. It's about a mile high here, and the altitude is playing in altitude as some people may have experienced is very different, both in terms of how the ball flies, but also in terms of catching your breath in between points. I struggle with that. So
Mm,
yeah, that second step we're trying to sort of reset, use our breath. And then that third step we're starting to get into, like, what are we trying to do next? Can I really prepare for that next point? Can I have that clear plan? I think focusing on our first couple shots. Okay, if I'm serving, where do I want to serve? And then can I try to set up my forehand or my weapon? Or maybe I'm returning and I want to attack the first serve. I want to attack the second serve return and I want to follow it into the net. Or I want to, I'm really trying to come up with a clear game plan. in that step, and then I'm going into, what is my ritual? I'm bouncing the ball or I'm getting on my toes, but having some sort of system where it's like, I'm recognizing what happened, I'm resetting, and then I start to really focus on that next point. I think having something like that can help players to put that last point behind us, because I think if not, it's really hard to, yeah, it can be really hard to let go of it, right? We play a point and we double fall. Do
Yeah.
we miss an easy volley? And, being able to let go of that, I think can be a real challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And this might be, I think it's on topic, but I mean, when you were speaking about this, it made me think more about this other note that I wrote, which is negative talk. And then wanted to ask you about sort of tough love. I wrote this down, tough love, because sometimes I treat myself like sort of tough love, like I'll say rude or mean things kind of thing. But I'm really wondering how this all works in with this routine. And I'm wondering, positive talk obviously is helpful, but I don't want to say negative talk, but can tough love or, hey, come on, do this? I mean, can that be helpful in between shots, or do we just totally stay away from that stuff?
Different things work for different people. I think, we can look at the top players in the world, and I think we can think about their
Yeah.
mentalities, or at least how we perceive their mentalities to be. And I think different things work for them. And I think different things work for each of us. I mean, I think sometimes there's, people think of, oh, I just want to be positive with myself. I just
Yeah.
want to be positive. But I think sometimes that doesn't fully, that's not always maybe as effective as well. When we're just being positive, we're sometimes overlooking some of the other things that we actually need to focus on.
Mm.
I think the tough love approach can be effective. I think sometimes that might go a little overboard, where we're maybe being too harsh or too critical
Mhm.
with ourselves, and then that can, hold us back, or that can um, get in our way in some way. So I think, yeah, we just want to be, really intentional with how we talk to ourselves. I think one
Mm.
exercise that I try to do with people sometimes is to try to think about the situations where maybe your self-talk can either hold you back, or maybe it can be more negative, or maybe it is more tough love. Can we think about what are some of those situations? Maybe it's right after somebody's broken my serve. Maybe it's right before a match and I'm feeling anxious or nervous.
Mhm.
Um, maybe it's some other time. And can I start to think about what are the situations, and can I actually write down what are some of the things I'm saying to myself? And
Mm.
sometimes when somebody has written down some of those thoughts, or has um, when the act of writing it down and actually reading it back, you can start to realize, okay, maybe some of these things I'm saying to myself, maybe they feel like tough love in the moment, but as I'm reading them now, I don't know if these are actually helping me.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, having some sort of way to maybe analyze what are our thoughts, what are some of the things that I'm saying to myself, and if I recognize that they're not helping me, or some of them aren't helping me, can I start a process of trying to come up with an intention? How do I want to talk to myself at deuce point? How
Yeah.
do I want to talk to myself in a tiebreaker? Can I plan some of that out? And it doesn't mean I'm going to be perfect and use that all the time, but I think it does build some awareness in terms of how we talk to ourselves. And then I think by having that intention, hopefully over time, we can start to use some of these specific things that we want to be saying to ourselves more and
Mhm.
more.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm glad you said, though, and pointed out that, obviously everyone's different, because I've always found it interesting that some world-class athletes talk about that chip on their shoulder. And I view that as, growing up, someone told them they couldn't do something. Someone sort of berated them or talked down to them. And I can see obviously humans going down two different paths, right? One human sort of being quiet and sort of, more like, hey, I'm not going to speak up. I'm not going to do things. And this person who's world-class athlete who's talking about this chip on the shoulder, somehow took that negative energy and turned it into a positive. So I guess that's what I was sometimes trying to focus on. I'm always trying to wonder, if I do get frustrated, if I do yell, if I do those things, like, should I actively try not to do those things? But I think you answered it. Everyone's different. as long as it's not negative talk that's going to hurt me and destroy my self-confidence, I think I should use it. Right?
Yeah, I think we want to be in a place where we can channel the anger or the frustration. I think um, that's what because everyone feels angry at times,
Hmm.
right? You miss an easy shot, or you're losing, you're not playing as well as you want to. Everyone can feel that. It's just a matter of, okay, once we feel that, what do we decide to do about it? Am I letting it out, and am I, deciding to throw my racket or swearing at myself, or am I able to somehow channel that frustration into greater focus or greater motivation? Okay, I'm frustrated, but I really want to find a way to get to win. Or I'm frustrated, but I'm going to use that to try to feel even more focused in this next point. So I think when it can be channeled, then it can be beneficial. When the anger is sort of taking over you and you're out of control, that's when I think we want to
Mm.
be, that's what we want to avoid.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any sort of tips on? I've been hitting with my wife's really playing a lot of league lately, and she's technically a 3.0, and you know those ratings too, right? Obviously, okay.
Yep.
And so she's a 3.0. She plays some 3.5 league, but I've been hitting with her and her friends more. And one of the things I notice is, obviously, but I think this is everyone. In practice, we're loose, and sometimes in the match, people will revert to what's safe, I think, and sometimes safe isn't the best stroke. Like we might go back to a slice when we shouldn't, or things like that. And I think that's just nervousness or maybe not trusting ourselves. Is there sort of something that we can do in the match at that moment to sort of get past that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and I think it's an experience that most tennis players, maybe all tennis
Yeah.
players, experience. Um, I think there's different things. I mean, I think there's things that we can do relating to physical tension. Um, and then I think there's things more on the mental side. So I think, something like breathing and being really intentional with our breath, both on court and off court, can do a lot to help us release some of that tension. There's more and more athletes now talking about meditation. Novak Djokovic, Iga Swiatek, Bianca Andreescu. I know LeBron, does a lot of is one of his big sponsors is Calm, and he talks about
Mm.
meditating. So I think something like meditation can be really helpful. There's also something called progressive muscle relaxation, or PMR, which is something that people can do. They can even try this now as they're listening, where essentially they're tensing and loosening different parts, different muscle groups. So you can start at your feet and sort of curl your toes, if you're sitting on with your feet on the ground, curl your toes towards your heels and sort of hold that tension, keep holding it, and then release it. And then you could do the same thing with your calves and tense your calves, hold it and release it. And then your
I'm like
quad.
doing it right now as you're talking to. I was like,
Yeah, good, good. And you could do sort of work your way up your body that way. And what that does is it really gives you a tool that you can use, where if I'm feeling tense, hopefully first of all through using a tool like that, I can start to recognize where physically is that tension? Is that held in a certain part of my body? And then, number two, if I'm feeling that way, I have the ability, hopefully, to loosen, to tense and then loosen up that part of my body in the moment. So I
mm,
think some combination of breathing and progressive muscle relaxation can be really helpful tools physically. And then I think mentally, I think players want to be clear about how they want to play. And I think everyone falls into this trap, myself included. But, because we're practicing, we're not afraid to miss.
yeah.
And then we're in a match, and all of a sudden there's some more consequences.
Mm.
Okay, I'm thinking about my NTRP rating, or I'm thinking about my UTR rating, or I'm thinking about who's going to see this score.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, rather than folks saying, "Hey, I hit this nice forehand with topspin," okay, maybe I slice it because maybe I don't want to miss it.
Hmm.
So I think it's very easy to shift in those moments. I think if we can have a clear idea for how we play at our best, or the type of player that we're trying to become and striving to become. I think the more clear we can be about those things, the better. Um, and then we can, really try to judge ourselves at the end of the match and say, okay, how well did I do with my goal? I was trying to play in this way. How did I do with that? And hopefully the next time around I can do a little better with that. And just trying to, keep moving in that direction based on based on what our intention is in terms of how we're trying to play, and then having some sort of reflection process. Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's something else, maybe it's a conversation where we're able to reflect on our performance and you know measure ourselves based on what we were trying to do, and compare that to what we actually did out there. And I think having some sort of process like that helps us to make improvements over time.
So you've talked about this a few times, but I'm assuming some sort of self-reflection, some sort of like, discussion or dissecting your own match after the match is helpful too then, right? I mean, I guess when I said self-reflection, I think I'm referencing what you were talking about earlier, which was, you talk to people after their match. So what is that talk about? I mean, what are we talking about after the match?
I think there's different things that we can talk about after a match. I mean, there's a very simple reflection exercise called a 3-2-1 that I will sometimes use to at least start the conversation, which is three things that went well, two things that we want to improve upon, and one thing that we learned. And I think just even being able to start here, where just say, because I think oftentimes after a match, we feel like that didn't go well at all, or nothing went well. So I think,
Yeah.
can we at least find certain things that we did well out there? Maybe
Okay.
it's, maybe I had great sportsmanship, or maybe I started off the match with a good attitude. Or maybe I had good effort. So, can we at least identify what those things are that went well? And then, be able to focus on some of these other pieces. But I think what it does is it can help us sort of put things into perspective a little bit, and rather than just focusing on, one aspect of our performance, we can start to see the bigger picture and start to have more, maybe a fair understanding of how we actually played.
Yeah. And I like the fact that number one was what was it again? The learn say the
So three things that we did
uh,
well, two things we want to improve
improve on.
upon, and one thing that we learned.
Yeah, none of that is really negative. I mean, two things we want to improve upon, I guess someone can come at it with sort of a negative, or even number one, what something that we learned can be like, oh, I screwed up on this and here's what I want to change. But I like how it's all sort of phrased in a positive way. But obviously, through failure we learn a lot, obviously, and some people say we learn more through failure. So that's interesting. That's good. I like that. Um, so is there what I'm trying to figure out too is there some sort of way of recognizing when I'm at my peak mental state? And the thing I've talked about with some other people is I've personally found myself at the height of my tennis ability when I'm playing the best. There's this feeling of I'm aware of everything going on around me, but I can sort of dismiss it in a weird way. It doesn't really matter to me. Like there can be a kid screaming to my left or a dog barking, and I can acknowledge it, but it doesn't bug me. And then also, coupled with that, I found that and I want to say this right, but when I'm a little, I think it's confident slash cocky, not rude, but there's this confidence slash cockiness where I have this ability to sort of, I can speak up when someone calls a ball out that's in, I have this ability of being different. And other times I'll just be quiet, right? And I feel like I'm trying to find this peak mental spot where I go, oh, that's when I played best. Is there anything like that, or obviously it's all individual based?
Yeah, no, I think it is individual in a certain way. I mean, I think for most people, it's when they play best is sort of a combination of being aware of what's happening
Mhm.
around them and within them, um, but also having the ability to sort of decide what we do with it. So I think if we think about, mindfulness, and I know I brought up meditation earlier, I sort of think of it as that awareness of the moment. What's happening right now? What's happening around me? Do I hear that kid, screaming and crying?
Yeah.
Do I, are there certain things that I'm seeing, around me? Am I, you know, can I really connect to my senses in the moment in terms of what's going on around me, but also what's going on within me? How do I feel? What thoughts am I having? What are the emotions that I'm experiencing? So can I really connect with the moment? Which I think is a challenge. I think as athletes, and especially in tennis players, is a sport where there's instant feedback. We win a point
Mhm.
or we lose a point. There's no in between, and so I think it's very easy to look backwards and be upset about things that have happened in the past, or look forwards and start to think about, what if I win today? What if I lose today? I hope I don't, whatever. Hope I don't lose this. Um, Very challenging to stay present. So I think that awareness of the moment is key. But then it's also, what am I going to do with it? Okay, I have this awareness. I'm able to, be in the present at least for a period of time. And then what can I do about it? Um, how can I go into this next point, and really use that? Or do I want to be, maybe in a different state where I'm, you know, a little bit less locked in and focused, where maybe I want to be a little bit looser because maybe some people have the experience of maybe feeling a little bit too much in the moment, or, too, I think in a certain way that can lead to some nerves or some anxiety when you're, too fixated on what's happening right now. Sometimes people need to just take a step back and maybe, find those ways to loosen up and not to take this next point so seriously, because I think sometimes it can feel like that next point is that everything in the world, that everything rides on this next point, or that it's life and death.
Yeah.
But instead, recognizing, okay, this is just one point, and if I take a step back and just, you know, put things into perspective a little bit. So I think that was a long answer to your question, but I hope that kind of touched on some of the pieces that you were
No, it,
getting
it
at.
definitely does. I mean, the thing I always think about, David Goggins, obviously, big name, and he
Mhm.
invented Goggins, right? So he talks about this, right? His name's David Goggins, but he always thinks of Goggins as this different person. And so I literally think about this. I sometimes think, should I go into the match sort of being this other person? If I can recognize that when I'm playing best, it's when I am a little confident slash cocky. Again, not rude. I don't ever want to be rude to anyone, even outside of tennis, right? I want to be very respectful towards everyone. But there is this thing where when I cross the line of I want to win, and then there's that translates into me being sort of this different person where I won't be pushed around. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I grew up a way where if I was pushed around, if I stayed quiet, or if I was pushed around, I pushed back. But I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, should I go into the match trying to invent that Goggins personality of, okay, I need to be someone different today, start out being cocky, start out being a little more confident than usual instead of finding it during the match. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that question
Totally.
make sense?
I think it does, and I think, and I like that you brought up David Goggins. I'm a big fan of him as well. Yeah, I think if we can recognize when we play best. Okay, I play, you were saying you play best in that state where maybe there is a little bit of that confidence or even a little bit of cockiness. I don't see anything wrong with that. Um, can you try to bring about that state from the start intentionally,
Hmm.
right? So it's like, okay, how can I be intentional with my preparation leading up to this match so that I can give myself the best possible chance to start this match with the mindset that I want, so that I'm not having to wait, a few games into
Yeah.
the match to hopefully get to that point. If I can, be intentional with it from the start, I think I give myself a much better chance to actually make that happen. Because I think if not, if I do play best in that state where that's a little bit confident and a little bit cocky, and then I fall, you know, I go down 3 love, maybe it's a lot harder to get into that state.
Yeah.
Where if I've started in that place, whether I'm up or behind, hopefully I'm able to sort of keep that mentality going, and then I can hopefully implement, some problem solving and think about, okay, why is the score 3 love? What's happening right now? Is
Yeah.
is my opponent just beating me? Is there something I could be doing better? What's going on? But hopefully we've at least started with that point of that mentality that we want.
Yeah. Okay, good. Um, oh, I want to go back to something too, because we talked about visualization. One of the podcasts I did was with my friend Bobby Kilty. He's on another league out here, 5.0 rated player, about a half hour away from me. And he was a World Series champ. He came in for a pinch hit in 2007. Didn't play the whole World Series. He was on the Boston Red Sox. But he came in game 4 and pretty much hit the game-winning home run. First at bat of the series in game 4. Hasn't been in the field at all. Came in as a pinch hitter. And first pitch literally hit a home run, and it ended up sealing the game for them for the 2007 World Series. He talked about in the podcast with him visualization, and it was, I guess, not surprising, but at the time I was a little like, wow, my eyebrows rose. He said before getting up to bat, he visualized hitting that home run 400 to 500 times, I think was his quote, just that day. Like that's all he said was he visualized. And I guess this is the back room stuff that I don't know about baseball. But he said he knew if this particular pitcher comes up at this particular time, they're going to pinch hit him. And it's exactly what happened. So he was able to really focus his visualization on one particular pitcher in one particular moment. And so getting to that at bat at that moment, I guess he hit the home run like 500 times prior to that during the day, which is sort of how he described it. So can you, I guess, more expound on visualization and how important it is?
It's extremely important, and I love that example. I hadn't heard that example of him, but I think for so many athletes, visualization is a really key critical tool, because what it does, what essentially visualization is mental rehearsal. So I'm mentally rehearsing what I want to happen in a particular situation. And I think, that we can do that in different ways. And that can be just a positive experience. Like, okay, I'm going up to the plate and I'm, hitting a home run here. And it sounds like he did that, and, and pictured himself in that situation and rehearsed that over and over and over again. And then, there's a lot of research that shows that when we do that, our brain doesn't necessarily know the difference. It feels like we've actually been in that situation. Um, so I think that's one way to do it. I think another way is we can visualize ourselves in tough situations, in challenging situations. If we're sticking with the baseball example, maybe it's an 0-2 count. If we're in a tennis example, maybe we're serving at love 40, or it's, we're down in the set, or whatever it is, and we're picturing ourselves in a tough situation, but we're visualizing ourselves coming through it and being successful, and thinking about how do we implement our tools that we have in that tough situation. I think a couple things that I like to suggest in terms of making visualization feel more realistic, because I think sometimes it doesn't, especially when someone's just starting they close their eyes and maybe it doesn't feel so realistic. So a couple things that I like to suggest are really to try to get the senses involved. So not just what am I seeing, not just, okay, I'm watching myself play a point the way that I want to, but can I get these different senses involved? Can I think about the sound of the ball? Can I think about the sound of my feet, my sneakers against the ground? Are there other sounds from the court over, birds chirping? Um, you know, how about the sense of feel? Can I visualize the feel of the grip in my hand? Can I visualize the way that the ball feels when I make contact with it? If I'm about to serve, can I visualize the fuzz of the ball in my hand? Smell and taste are always a little tougher.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a smell of freshly cut grass. Maybe if we're playing indoors, there's a familiar smell of the indoor tennis facility. I grew up in Connecticut, and there,
Yeah.
we play indoors for a good portion of the year, and that's a familiar smell
Mm.
for many people. Taste. Maybe there's water or Gatorade that you're having on the bench. Can we visualize that, or the taste of sweat? So when we can get these different senses involved and also emotions, so maybe there's a challenging emotion like anxiety or anger or whatever it is, um, at Love 40, but then maybe we come through it, and then what's the emotion then? Maybe it's excitement. Maybe it's something like that. So trying to get these senses and these emotions involved makes our visualization feel more real, feel more realistic. Oftentimes I'll work with athletes and we'll write out a script. So it's, them in a situation, though they're writing it out in third person, and they'll record it.
Mm.
And then they can close their eyes and listen to their own voice of them, talking through step by step by step what happens in that situation, how they get from Love 40 to winning that game, how they turn that match around when they were feeling all that anger earlier in that match. So I think there's different ways to do it. Maybe someone's working on their serve. They're trying to hit their serve in a new way, and they can visualize themselves over and over and over again hitting that serve in that new way. You're essentially getting those mental repetitions or rehearsing that
Mhm.
over and over again, just the way that Bobby did. So I love that example.
Yeah. And that actually perfectly goes into this next thing that I got from your website, which I think is obviously easy to agree with, which is in order to succeed, we must first believe that we can. And so I think I got that from a post in 2020 on your Instagram page. But to me, that's sort of the same thing with this visualization stuff, which is if we can't see ourselves succeeding, if we can't see ourselves maybe even doing the shot that we're attempting to do during the match, we're not going to be able to do it. And so I've always been so amazed at the story of Roger Bannister, this runner in 1954, the first person to break the 4-minute barrier for the mile. And so I always found the story very interesting that once he did it, many people started doing it after. And I'm only bringing that up to hopefully combine the two, which is the visualization. In order to succeed, we have to believe we can. Somehow the world started to believe that they can break this 4-mile minute barrier once they saw another human do it. And I found it so interesting. Just last night, I looked up. I'm like, I wonder when the next person ran a sub 4-minute mile. It was 46 days later when someone broke Roger Bannister's record. And so everyone just started breaking it. High schoolers now break it, obviously, really top high schoolers, but people are breaking that record. I don't want to say every day, but a lot. And so I guess just to stay on this subject a little more, how important is it to believe? And is connected to visualization then, right?
Definitely. I think that self-belief piece is key, but I think it's a real challenge for most people.
Hmm.
I think we can even look at this at the professional level. Somebody like Djokovic, right? There's certain times where he seems unbeatable, completely unbeatable. And then you see, the Wimbledon final and Alcaraz in a absolute battle beats him in 5 sets. Now, does that change the belief of other top 10, top
Yeah.
20 players that not that they're gonna beat him because
Yeah.
I think it's a tall task, but that it's possible that they can do it. Just like, when somebody sees Roger Bannister break that 4-minute mile, not that they're gonna break that 4-minute mile, but at least that it's possible. And I think when it comes to self-belief, we want to when we go up and play anybody, and I think this is true for people that are listening to this podcast, whoever you're playing, you don't necessarily want I don't think you necessarily want to think that you will beat this person. I think if we go in to matches thinking I will beat this person, I think we're in many ways setting ourselves up for, I don't want to say setting ourselves up for failure, but I think we're potentially making things tougher. We're giving ourselves there's the potential of of overlooking an opponent. If I think, okay, I will beat this person. Maybe I don't take them as seriously. Maybe I don't do all my preparation the way that I need to. Maybe I don't move my feet the way I need to. So instead of I will beat this person, I think, can we go in and say, I can? I know I can
Can.
potentially
Okay.
beat this person. Whether this person is rated, a point higher than me, a half point higher than me, whether this person is around the same rating or lower than me, whatever it is, feeling like I can compete, I can beat this person, I can be successful here. Doesn't mean that I will, doesn't mean that I should. And I think a lot of times people use words like I should beat this person, I'm supposed to beat this person, I need to. But instead of that, saying I can. I know I can. It's a matter of, will I be able to play at that level? Will I be able to utilize my physical and mental tools to make it happen? But I know that I can. And I think that gives a certain sense of confidence. And then it's just a matter of, you know, being able to bring your game out
Yeah.
and make it.
And
It doesn't
execute. Yeah.
exactly.
I like that. No, that is interesting because when you said, it's not always, maybe not the best choice to say, I will, I will. I was a little like, I wonder where he's going with this, but I really like that actually, that I can is this positive approach that I have the ability to. And now I have to recognize that I have to execute. That's awesome. I like that. And you touched on something too that I wrote a little note on, which was I wrote down losing 10 tiebreaks in a row, winning 10 tiebreaks in a row. And the reason I'm bringing that up now is you talked about this Djokovic thing where Djokovic, I think his tiebreak record was ridiculous. He was like unstoppable in tiebreaks. And that has to be mental, right? That just has to be mental because why is he so, 100% or whatever the crazy tiebreak thing was in the last half year where he didn't lose any tiebreaks? And I'm wondering how destructive or how helpful is it to go through success or to go through bad times. Like if I lost the last 10 tiebreaks I got into, that's going to screw with me mentally. I'm really wondering how to break that. And I'm also sort of wondering, should I even care? Like, I don't know. I'm struggling with this. Like if we get into these bad habits kind of thing, right? How do we break those? And losing's a habit sort of too, I think.
Losing can definitely be a habit, and I think the expectation of losing can be a real challenge here. Where if we have lost the last 10 tie breaks, when and we get into a tiebreaker, it's often, oh, here we go again,
Yep.
or we we feel that it's not going to go well, and we expect that, and then it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy in a certain way.
Mm.
I see the same thing with deuce points when people play no ad, and some people are saying, "Oh, I hate playing no ad. I always
Yeah.
lose in those situations." And it's like, I would question people to say, "Okay, how are you talking to yourself going into a deuce point? Are you talking to yourself and it's saying that you're expecting to lose it, or are you focusing on, okay, what do I need to do in this point?" So I think a lot of it is based on those expectations. And I think, yeah, in terms of maybe turning things around, um, I think it's, and I think this connects to self-talk. I think it's a lot about catching ourselves, noticing it. I don't think it's the end of the world if we use certain phrases or certain words that aren't the most helpful, but I think we want to at least recognize it and catch it in the moment when we are using it. Okay, if I'm about to get into a tiebreaker and I say, "Oh, here we go again. You've lost the last 10.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't going to go well." Can I just notice? Can I notice and catch myself saying those things? And then hopefully, then I can introduce maybe some more effective self talk in that moment. But I think that can only happen once we're aware that we're saying it. Once we catch ourselves talking in that way, then we can start to introduce something that's maybe more productive in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. And the more we talk, the more I see, or at least for me, after this phone call and prior to matches and when I have off time, I'm going to intentionally try to visualize a match. And I've never thought about, like you said, the sounds, the feel of the grip. I've never went that far. I have went as far as one time tried to visualize a full match in my brain. It was really tough, actually. But I'm going to try to do what you said. I know it's going to be helpful. I really do. And oh, you know what's funny is I wrote this quote down too. This was an Aristotle quote, but he said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. The only reason I bring that up here is because we were talking about this. Losing could be a habit, winning could be a habit. And I'm just really trying to find that way of, I guess, continuing excellence, you know, seeing a positive and somehow continuing it and making it a habit. And because sometimes we have these like flashes of amazement and excellence in a match, and then I sort of forget about it. It's like, why, man, 6 months ago I was playing so good. What the heck happened? And I don't know what happened, to be honest. And I'm trying. I might just be the answer might just be to visualize or to self-reflect after the match, which I've never done. And so I'm really wondering how to keep that habit going. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think with both of those, with something like visualization and with something like that self-reflection piece, um, yeah, and I love that quote from Aristotle. It's how can we get to that point of doing it repeatedly? And I think, being able to write out, what am I doing before a match and what am I doing after a match? So maybe what I'm doing before a match is I'm doing some breathing techniques for a few minutes. And maybe then I'm visualizing a couple of different things. Maybe I'm visualizing myself playing points the way that I want to. Some people will visualize their highlight reel or
hmm,
even some of their best matches and try to visualize some of that. Um, maybe there's some other behaviors we want to do. Maybe I want to review my self-talk and how I want to talk to myself out there. So can I write out some of those key things that I want to do before a match and also write out some of those key things that I want to do after a match? And I think the biggest one on the mental side is the reflection. But, maybe I can write out a few things I want to do after a match. Maybe I want to do something physical like foam rolling. Maybe I want to do some stretching. Maybe I want to do some reflection, right? And can I write all out, but also think about when? I think with the reflection piece, sometimes that takes place too soon. I think sometimes it's right after a match and people start to try to reflect and they're
yeah.
upset and they're, emotional and they try to reflect on their match too soon. I see this a lot with junior players. Sometimes it's that car ride home with the parents and they can
Uh,
be tense because they're upset and maybe the parent was watching and the parent noticed certain things. They're trying to get into that conversation and there's a lot of emotion there. And I think the same thing can happen with league players where you play a match, maybe you lose it or maybe you didn't play as well and you're frustrated, and rather than giving yourself that space to digest first and to process it first, you start trying to reflect on that match maybe a little bit too soon, and then it hasn't quite you haven't quite gotten to the point where you're ready to do that yet. So I think being able to plan out and write out when you do these things can, number one, make these tools more effective, and number two, you can be more consistent with them.
mhm. What's funny is I make the joke when I bring people on the podcast, I'm really just trying to improve myself. It's not really for the listeners, it's just for me. But, it's a joke, but part real. So let's focus on me for a second. So, what I got out of this podcast, really, and I think it's obviously very helpful, was I need to establish a routine prior to the match. And I've always found that that routine might include music, might include some sort of way of, getting me in the right mood and eating well, things like that, but also a routine during, which I've never thought about. So during the match, I need to establish a routine during the match in between points. Okay. And then including breathing and visualization, like during the match in between points. And then after the match, which I've never done, I guess I've, in a way, probably did bad self reflection or bad talk, like, why did I do that or something like that. But I need to diagnose myself after the match. Self reflection. What did I do right? What can I learn from during the match? What can I do better next time? I think that's a pretty good map for me in a way. I probably got some free advice from you today, right? obviously, but that's the point.
Absolutely, and I think just also being able to keep, recognize that each match is a learning experience, and I know that can maybe sound cliche, and I get that, but each time you go out for a match, it's not going to be it's not going to be the last match you play.
Yeah.
So can each match be practice for your future matches? Can each match be a learning experience? Can we, try to put in place a really nice system like what you just described before, during, and after, and try to learn from it? Okay, how did that work this time? Okay, maybe certain aspects of the system worked really well. Maybe I didn't prepare the way that I wanted to. Okay, how can I, when I reflect, can I reflect on that piece as well so that next time around, hopefully, I can do that piece better? So I think just being able to view it as a learning experience and frame it that way rather than feeling like everything comes down, everything is based on this one match. I think, sometimes it's easy for tennis players to sort of have this tunnel vision and feel like each match we play is just the most important,
Mm.
so critically important. But I think that puts a lot of pressure on us. And I think a great way to take pressure off is to recognize, hey, this is one match. This feels important now. I'm going to try to do my absolute best, but I will play other matches. This match is practice for my next match, and I want to learn as much as I can from this match. And I think going through that sort of process can really help with that.
And how important is it to go through matches to put yourself in those tough spots, right? I mean, how important is that? Obviously, it's different from practice, right? Like we were saying at the beginning, there's a looseness in the practice. There's no consequence of the big point being lost if we miss that forehand because we're just in drills. But how important is it to put us in match tough situations from a mental side?
I think it's critical. I really do. I mean, I think the senses of nervousness or anxiety, the ups and downs of emotions that you experience during a match. It's I think it's tough to replicate it during practice.
Mm.
Think there's ways to do it where we can try to, you know, add pressure to practice, but I think it really is a very different feeling. And I think, it really is a skill to be able to play well in those higher pressure moments. And I think that's, in order to build on that skill, it really needs to be practiced. So I think it's really, really critical.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so true. And that's why I enjoy it's funny because league play, it's all about fun, but everyone's like really into it, right? And so like I really enjoy that part of it. Like when it becomes the league, it's like everyone's so like pumped and but I tell everyone like that's the fun of it, like to get into that spot where you're nervous or where you're excited. And we just don't get that from Saturday morning doubles with friends kind of thing. It's just totally different, even though we're still playing a full match, on the weekend. But until you get into that tournament or league, it's a totally different world that I think just elevates your game and your mental side once you put yourself in those positions. Um, I forgot to ask you at the beginning. I'll sort of maybe end it with this, but what are you doing right now in life? Like, what do you do for fun outside of this stuff? You have a family, other sports, running. What are you doing over there?
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, thanks for asking. I mean, I moved to Boulder, Colorado in December, and really liking
Ah,
life here. Yeah, my girlfriend and I moved here in December. We sort of followed my brother and his fiance at the time, now wife, who moved out there a few months before us, and really liking life out here. I mean, there's I think just a great lifestyle. There's we're near the mountains.
yeah.
Do a lot of hiking. Things like that. Trying to play some more tennis. I do quite a bit of travel. I was at Roland Garros earlier this
Are
year.
you really? That's so cool.
Yeah, so I do quite a bit of travel, some related to tennis, some not. I like to travel within the U.S., outside the U.S., and that's definitely a real passion of mine. And yeah, just really really like um, and really just passionate about a lot of the work that I do in terms of helping people sort of overcome whatever's getting in their way in terms of their performance. Sometimes it is a physical thing, sometimes it's a mental piece, but just trying to find ways to be able to analyze your performance and move past whatever's getting in your way. So that there's definitely that excites me. And then I think some of these other pieces that I do, some of these other things that I do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in terms of tennis. I do some running as well. I ran a half marathon here in Boulder a few months back, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Didn't quite as much as I wanted to, but really enjoyed it nonetheless. So I think the tennis, the running, the travel, I think all of it sort of fits in a certain way when I'm meeting with somebody, because I feel like in a certain way I have more things that I can talk to them about, or I can make connections in different areas that connect to the work that I do.
Yeah. And if someone wants to contact you, is it best through Instagram or just call your number on your website?
Yeah, there's my phone number's on my website. My email is there as well. My website is Tiebreaker Psych. Yeah, Instagram is there. I also have my podcast that I'm the co-host of, Tennis IQ podcast, on the mental side of the game, along with Dr. Brian Lomax. But yeah, people can reach out through my website. I offer a free introductory session if anyone's interested in meeting for 30 to 45 minutes, and learning a little bit more and seeing if it's a good fit.
Cool. I don't know, sometimes I don't want to ask this, but do you want to talk about your fees? Like, how does this work? Is it sort of a per session thing, or do you want to bring that up right now, or does it depend on the person and what they need?
Yeah, well, I offer some different packages. Again, happy to sort of discuss that individually with people,
Yeah.
but it's I offer, again, I have that first session, that free first session, and then I have different packages of 5, 10, and 15 sessions. I would say in
Okay.
terms of pricing, they're priced out similar to a private tennis lesson.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, a similar sort of pricing there, and it's a little bit of a difference if somebody does, based on which package they do, 5, 10, 15 sessions. And so kind of depends in that way, but happy to discuss that further with people, and just kind of figure out what works best for each person.
Yeah. And that's cool. And then it can all usually be by Zoom, obviously, right? Because we're everywhere in the country. Okay, cool. That's so good. Well, I'm definitely going to keep you in mind. I promise I'm going to try, not try. I'm going to do a session with you. So we'll do some stuff, because this was interesting for me. So I really appreciate it, Josh. I like to keep these around an hour. It's an hour 7, so I mean that's perfect for me. Just thank you. I don't know what else to say to end this, but did I miss anything? Is there, hey, Anthony, you should have said this one little thing that we missed, or we just sort of covered everything?
I think we covered a lot. Yeah, I think we covered a lot, and let's keep in touch. I'll definitely take
Yeah.
you up on that. We'll do a session, and we'll be in touch. And I'm eager and excited to hear how it goes once you implement some of these things we were talking about, routines and visualization, and some of these things. It would be great to hear how that goes for you.
Yeah. Appreciate it, Josh. Well, thank you. I'm going to hit the recording off here, and we'll stay on for a second, but I appreciate it. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Anthony.
Thanks.
Thank you.